If food is going into the trash tonight, why can't one bowl come to me? The question hung in the freezing Chicago air. Snow drifted across the sidewalk. Warm golden light spilled through the glass windows of Hughes' kitchen. Inside, guests laughed over expensive dinners. Outside, 8-year-old Ellie Johnson stood shivering in a thin coat, her fingers red from the cold. A few feet away, billionaire Nicholas Hughes had just stepped out of a black SUV. Before he could answer, Bradley Turner moved between them. "Get her away from the entrance," he snapped at security. Ellie tightened her grip on her worn backpack. Then she slowly unzipped it as if she was about to show something important. Nicholas noticed the look in her eyes. And for the first time that night, something felt very wrong. Before we continue, take a moment to tell us where you're watching from. Drop your country and local time in the comments. We'd love to see how far this story travels around the world. And if you enjoy stories about kindness, courage, and ordinary people making a difference, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next chapter. The wind howled between the apartment buildings as Ellie Johnson climbed the narrow concrete stairs to the 3rd floor. Her fingers were numb. The cold had followed her all the way home. She pushed open the apartment door and stepped inside. The room wasn't much warmer. An old heater rattled in the corner, fighting a battle it had already lost. The smell of cough medicine lingered in the air. On a worn couch beneath a thin blanket, Angela Johnson stirred weakly. "You okay, baby?" she'd asked. Ellie forced a smile. "Yeah, Mom." It wasn't entirely true. Her stomach hurt. She hadn't eaten since lunchtime at school. Angela tried to sit up. A cough stopped her. Ellie hurried over. "Stay down. I'm fine. You said that yesterday." Angela laughed softly. Then another cough bent her forward. Ellie reached for a glass of water on the table. The glass was nearly empty. Just like the refrigerator, just like the cabinet, just like the wallet inside Angela's purse. The factory where Angela had worked for nearly 9 years had closed 3 months earlier. Since then, every day had become a calculation. Which bill could wait? Which meal could be skipped? How long could they stretch what little remained? Angela never complained. Not once. But Ellie noticed things. She noticed when her mother pretended she wasn't hungry. She noticed when Angela claimed she had already eaten. She noticed when her mother secretly divided one sandwich into 2 pieces and pretended she preferred the smaller half. Children noticed more than adults realized. "Did you find something to eat?" Angela asked. Ellie hesitated. Then she nodded. The lie sat heavily in her chest. She didn't want her mother worrying. Not tonight. Angela smiled and relaxed back onto the couch. "Good." Ellie looked away. Outside the window, snow continued falling. Streetlights painted the night in pale yellow streaks. For a moment she thought about the restaurant again. The warmth, the smell of food, the bright chandeliers, and the man stepping from the black SUV. Nicholas Hughes. She had recognized him from television. Everyone knew who he was. People called him a billionaire who cared about communities. A businessman who gave back, a success story. Yet, somehow, Bradley Turner had spoken for him before he could answer. The memory bothered her. Not because she had been turned away, she was used to that. It bothered her because Bradley had looked scared. Not annoyed, not angry, scared, as if he didn't want her speaking, as if he was afraid she might say something. Ellie opened her backpack. Inside was a small notebook. The corners were bent. The cover was peeling. Her mother had given it to her on her 7th birthday. "Write things down," Angela had said. "The truth gets harder to lose when it's written." Ellie smiled at the memory. Then she opened to the latest page. There, written in pencil, was the license plate number she had copied from the truck behind Hughes' kitchen. She stared at it. Something about that truck felt wrong. The food boxes had carried company logos. Why move them in the middle of the night? Why use an unmarked vehicle? Why look around before loading them? Questions spun through her mind. Meanwhile, across the city, Hughes' kitchen glowed like a palace. Inside, crystal glasses clinked. Soft jazz floated through the dining room. Servers moved gracefully between tables. The scent of roasted garlic and fresh bread filled the air. Nicholas Hughes stood near the center of it all. A crowd surrounded him. Investors, reporters, local officials. Everyone wanted a moment of his attention. Everyone wanted a photograph. A handshake, a quote. Nicholas smiled when expected, answered questions, posed for pictures. But his thoughts kept drifting. Back to the little girl outside. If food is going into the trash tonight, why can't one bowl come to me? The words replayed again, and again, and again. He looked toward the front windows. The sidewalk was empty now. She was gone. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling. "Everything okay?" asked Bradley Turner. Nicholas glanced over. Bradley wore his usual confident smile. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect answers. The man had been running regional operations for years. Reliable, efficient, respected. "Who was the little girl outside?" Nicholas asked. For the first time, Bradley's smile tightened. "Just a kid looking for attention." Nicholas watched him carefully. She seemed hungry. Bradley shrugged. "People say a lot of things." A server approached. Bradley immediately shifted the conversation toward quarterly numbers and upcoming charity events. Nicholas allowed it. For now. But something felt off. Hours later, after most guests had gone home, activity continued behind the restaurant. Sarah Miller was finishing inventory. The kitchen smelled of soup stock and baked bread. Steam drifted through the air. She glanced toward a large container of untouched soup. Enough food for dozens of people. Company policy required certain items to be discarded after service hours. Sarah hated that policy, always had. A sudden knock sounded at the back door. She opened it carefully. Ellie stood outside. Snow covered her shoulders. Sarah's eyes widened. "Honey?" Ellie looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize. I wasn't asking for money." "I know." Sarah's expression softened. Without another word, she disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, she returned carrying a sealed container. Warm soup, fresh bread, a bottle of water. Ellie's eyes widened. "Thank you." Sarah smiled. "Take it home." The container felt wonderfully warm in Ellie's frozen hands. For the first time all day she smelled real food. Before she could leave, another voice cut through the night. "What's going on here, Bradley?" Sarah froze. Ellie lowered her gaze. Bradley approached. His shoes crunched against fresh snow. The warmth vanished from the moment instantly. "I thought I made myself clear," Bradley said. Sarah folded her arms. "The food was going to be thrown away. That's not your decision. It's soup. It's company property." Sarah clenched her jaw. Ellie quietly stepped backward. Bradley noticed. His eyes narrowed. Then something unexpected happened. A truck rolled into the alley, the same truck Ellie had seen before. Her heart skipped. The same license plate, the same driver, the same unmarked vehicle. Workers immediately began loading sealed food boxes. Bradley turned toward them. For a second, he forgot Ellie was there, forgot Sarah, forgot everything else. "Move faster," he snapped. The workers obeyed. Ellie watched carefully. Every box carried Hughes' kitchen labels. Every box looked untouched, food, good food, enough to feed many families. She slowly opened her notebook, quietly, carefully, and began writing. Date, time, location, truck number, driver description, everything. The wind carried the smell of fresh bread through the alley. But something colder than winter settled into Ellie's chest, because deep down she knew she had just witnessed something important, something someone desperately wanted hidden. And across the alley, Bradley Turner suddenly looked in her direction. Their eyes met. For one brief second. And Bradley realized the little girl was writing. Bradley Turner didn't move, neither did Ellie. For a moment the alley felt strangely quiet. The workers continued loading boxes into the truck. Cardboard scraped against metal. The rear doors slammed shut. Snowflakes drifted beneath the yellow glow of a security light. Bradley's eyes remained fixed on the notebook in Ellie's hand. Then he smiled, a quick smile, too quick. The kind adults used when they wanted something hidden. "What are you writing there?" he asked. Ellie closed the notebook. "Nothing." Bradley took a step closer. The smell of expensive cologne mixed with the scent of fresh bread coming from the kitchen. "You keeping notes on people?" Ellie shrugged. "My mom says it's easier to remember things when you write them down." For a brief second, Bradley's jaw tightened. Then the smile returned. "That's good advice." He looked toward the truck. "Now you should probably head home." Sarah stood nearby watching. Something about the exchange made her uneasy. Ellie nodded politely. Then she turned and walked away. She didn't run, didn't look back, but she could feel Bradley's eyes following her until she disappeared around the corner. The apartment was dark when Ellie returned. Only a small lamp near the couch remained on. Angela was asleep. Her breathing sounded shallow. A half-empty bottle of medicine sat beside her. Ellie quietly placed the soup and bread on the table. The warm smell filled the room. For a moment, the apartment felt less lonely, less cold. She carefully poured some soup into a bowl. The steam rose slowly. Angela woke a few minutes later. Her eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "A lady from the restaurant gave it to me." Angela frowned. "You didn't beg, did you?" The question came quickly. Not angry, just worried. Ellie shook her head immediately. "No." Angela relaxed, because she knew her daughter. Ellie wasn't the kind of child who asked strangers for money, even when things were difficult. Especially when things were difficult. The two sat together eating soup in silence. Outside, the wind rattled the window. Inside, the warmth of the food slowly returned color to Ellie's cheeks. After a while, Angela noticed the notebook beside her. "You writing again?" Ellie nodded. "I saw something strange." Angela smiled tiredly. "Strange? How?" "A truck." "What kind of truck?" "The kind that doesn't look like it wants anyone looking at it." Angela laughed softly. "That's a very specific kind of truck." Ellie grinned. Then her expression grew serious again. "I think they're taking food somewhere." Angela reached over and touched her daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, sometimes things aren't exactly what they look like." "Maybe." "Maybe." Ellie looked down at the notebook. "Or maybe they are." Angela studied her daughter. Children often imagined things, but Ellie wasn't imaginative in that way. She observed, watched, remembered. Even as a little girl, she noticed details most adults ignored. That worried Angela, because people who noticed too much often found themselves in trouble. "Just be careful," she said quietly. Ellie nodded, but she wasn't sure she could let it go. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Snow covered the sidewalks. Cars moved slowly through slushy streets. At Hughes Kitchen headquarters downtown, Nicholas Hughes sat alone in his office. The city stretched beyond the glass walls. Thousands of windows. Thousands of lives. Most mornings the view motivated him. Today it distracted him. His coffee sat untouched. A file lay open on his desk. Annual Community Outreach Program. One of the company's largest charity initiatives. Millions of dollars invested every year. Food donations, school partnerships, community support. Programs Nicholas often spoke proudly about. Yet, the little girl outside the restaurant kept returning to his thoughts. He reached for the intercom. "Send Bradley in." A few minutes later, Bradley entered. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect confidence. "Good morning." Nicholas leaned back. "Tell me about the food donation program." Bradley's answer came instantly. Prepared, polished, professional. He described partnerships, distribution centers, community outreach, volunteer events. Everything sounded flawless. Too flawless. Nicholas had built businesses his entire life. He knew something important. Real operations always had problems. Delays, mistakes, complications. Anything described as perfect usually wasn't. "Any recent issues?" Nicholas asked. Bradley shook his head. "None." "Complaints?" "No." "Missed deliveries?" "No." The answer came too fast. Nicholas noticed. Bradley noticed Nicholas noticing. The room felt different suddenly. Neither man mentioned it. Instead, Bradley slid a report across the desk. Charts, photos, signatures. Everything appeared legitimate. Nicholas skimmed through the pages. One name appeared repeatedly. Rebecca Parker, director of a local community center. The signature appeared dozens of times. Proof of food deliveries. Proof of completed donations. Proof everything was working. At least on paper. Nicholas closed the file. "Good work," Bradley smiled. "Thank you." But as he left the office, Nicholas found himself staring at one particular signature. Something about it bothered him. He couldn't explain why, yet the feeling remained. Meanwhile, Ellie walked home from school carrying her backpack. The notebook rested inside. She had spent half the day thinking about the truck, half the day thinking about Bradley, the remaining half thinking about math. Math had gone badly, but the truck remained interesting. Instead of heading directly home, she took a detour. 3 blocks away stood the community center listed on one of the food donation flyers she had seen at Hughes' kitchen. The building was old. Brick walls, faded paint, a small playground covered in snow. Children's artwork decorated the windows. Ellie hesitated, then stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately. The smell of coffee and paper filled the lobby. A woman looked up from behind a desk. "Can I help you?" Ellie nodded. "Are you Rebecca Parker?" The woman smiled. "I am." Ellie approached carefully. She pulled out her notebook. Rebecca expected a school project, or maybe a fundraiser. Instead, Ellie asked a question. "Do you get food from Hughes' kitchen?" Rebecca blinked. "Sometimes." Ellie noticed the hesitation. Not a lie, but not a complete answer either. "Do you get a lot?" Rebecca studied her. "What makes you ask?" Ellie explained everything. The truck, the boxes, the late-night loading, the license plate, the notebook. Rebecca listened quietly. As the story continued, her smile slowly disappeared. When Ellie finished, Rebecca remained silent for several seconds. Then she leaned forward. "What was the license plate number?" Ellie handed over the notebook. Rebecca looked down and suddenly froze. The color drained from her face. "You know this truck." Rebecca slowly nodded. "Unfortunately." Ellie's heart started beating faster. "What is it?" Rebecca looked toward the office door to make sure nobody else was listening. Then she lowered her voice. "That transportation company was investigated 2 years ago." Ellie's eyes widened. "For what?" Rebecca closed the notebook. Her expression had become very serious. "For selling donated supplies that were supposed to go to families in need." The room suddenly felt colder. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, Ellie realized she might not have imagined anything at all. And somewhere across the city, Bradley Turner was already making phone calls to ensure nobody connected the pieces together. Rebecca Parker locked the office door. The click sounded louder than it should have. Ellie sat across from her in a folding chair, her backpack resting on her lap. Outside the office window, children laughed somewhere in the gymnasium. A basketball bounced against polished wood. Someone blew a whistle. Normal sounds. Comforting sounds. Yet neither Rebecca nor Ellie felt relaxed. Rebecca looked down at the notebook again. The truck number was still there. Written in careful pencil, every digit clear, every detail neat. "You wrote this the night you saw the truck?" Rebecca asked. Ellie nodded. "Right away." Rebecca smiled faintly. "Good." Ellie tilted her head. "Why?" "Because memories change." Rebecca tapped the notebook. "But records don't." The little girl looked at the pages. Her mother always said something similar. Truth faded when people argued about it. Truth stayed stronger when someone bothered to write it down. Rebecca opened a desk drawer and pulled out several folders. Stacks of delivery receipts appeared. She began comparing dates, comparing locations, comparing signatures. The deeper she looked, the more troubled she became. Ellie noticed. Adults always had tells. Rebecca stopped tapping her pen, stopped smiling, stopped making eye contact. Something was wrong. Finally, Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "When was the last time you saw the truck?" "Last night." "And before that?" Ellie thought carefully. "Maybe 2 weeks ago?" Rebecca's eyebrows rose. "You saw it before. Behind the restaurant. What was it doing?" "Loading boxes." "What kind of boxes?" "Hughes' kitchen boxes." Rebecca slowly exhaled, then she stood. "I need to make some phone calls." Ellie immediately rose too. "Am I in trouble?" Rebecca blinked. Then her expression softened. "No." "Are you sure?" "I'm very sure." Ellie looked relieved. Rebecca knelt beside her. "Listen carefully." The woman lowered her voice. "If anyone asks you questions about this, tell the truth." "I always do." "I know." Rebecca smiled. "That's why I'm worried." Across Chicago, Nicholas Hughes stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window. Snow drifted past the glass. The city looked peaceful from 40 stories above. He knew better. Cities only appeared calm from a distance. Up close, every block carried its own struggles. His phone buzzed. Another invitation. Another interview request. Another charity gala. He ignored it. His attention remained on the outreach reports sitting on his desk. Something about them continued bothering him. Nicholas picked up one page, then another, then another. Every signature looked identical. Too identical. His eyes narrowed. Years ago, before success, before investors, before private jets, he had handled every document himself. He remembered handwriting. Real handwriting changed slightly each time. Pressure, angle, speed, tiny imperfections. These signatures looked copied, perfectly copied. The thought unsettled him. His assistant knocked. "Mr. Hughes." "Yes. Bradley Turner is here for the regional review meeting." Nicholas glanced toward the conference room. "Send him in." Moments later, Bradley entered carrying a tablet. Confident, relaxed, professional. The same man Nicholas had trusted for years. "Morning," Bradley said. Nicholas nodded. "Morning." The meeting began normally. Revenue, staffing, expansion plans, marketing. Everything looked strong. Yet Nicholas found himself watching Bradley more than listening. Small things, tiny things. The way Bradley answered before questions were finished. The way he redirected conversations. The way he smiled whenever charity programs appeared on screen. As if rehearsed, as if practiced, as if protecting something. Finally, Nicholas interrupted. "Tell me about the South Side Community Center." Bradley's smile paused. Only briefly, but Nicholas noticed. The Rebecca Parker Center. Yes? Good partnership. Nicholas folded his hands. How often do deliveries arrive? Weekly. Any shortages? No. Complaints? No. Again, too perfect. Nicholas leaned back. I may visit personally. The reaction lasted less than a second. A tiny flicker, then gone. Bradley laughed. They'd love that. But something in his eyes suggested otherwise. That afternoon, Ellie walked towards Hughes' kitchen again. The cold air stung her cheeks. She wasn't planning to go inside. She simply wanted to look, observe. Maybe see the truck again. Curiosity pulled her there. Curiosity had always been her strongest weakness. The restaurant bustled with lunchtime customers. Luxury cars lined the street. People hurried in and out carrying expensive coats. Ellie stood across the road, watching, waiting. A delivery van pulled into the rear alley. Not the truck, different vehicle, different driver. Still, she remained. Minutes passed. Then, something unexpected happened. A black SUV stopped near the entrance. The same SUV from opening night. Nicholas Hughes stepped out. Ellie's eyes widened. She hadn't expected to see him. Neither had he expected to see her. Nicholas spotted the little girl immediately, standing near a snow-covered bench, watching the building, watching everything. He paused. For a moment, neither moved. Then Nicholas crossed the sidewalk. His security team looked confused. Executives didn't usually walk toward random children. Nicholas didn't care. He stopped a few feet away. Ellie looked up. The wind pushed strands of hair across her face. You again, Nicholas said. Ellie nodded. Me again. Nicholas almost smiled. Almost. What are you doing here? Ellie thought about lying. Instead, she chose honesty. Looking. Looking at what? The restaurant. Nicholas folded his arms. Why? Ellie hesitated, then decided. The truck. A strange silence followed. Traffic moved around them. Snow drifted past. Some pedestrians slowed, curious, watching. Nicholas glanced toward the alley. What truck? The one that comes late. His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. Enough for Ellie to notice. Adults revealed more than they realized. The truck that takes food away, she continued. Nicholas studied her carefully. What makes you think that's unusual? Ellie answered immediately. Because hungry people still need it. The words landed harder than she intended. Nicholas looked away briefly, toward the restaurant windows, toward tables filled with food, toward customers who would leave half their meals unfinished. The sight stirred an old memory, one he hadn't visited in years. A tiny apartment, an empty refrigerator. His mother pretending she wasn't hungry. The memory disappeared as quickly as it arrived. Nicholas focused again. What else did you see? Before Ellie could answer, another voice interrupted. Bradley Turner. Mr. Hughes. His tone was calm. Too calm. Bradley approached with a professional smile, but his eyes immediately found Ellie and hardened. Nicholas noticed. Ellie noticed too. Bradley looked like a man discovering a fire he thought he had already extinguished. This young lady again? Bradley asked. Ellie tightened her grip on her backpack. Nicholas remained silent, watching, listening. Bradley continued. She's been hanging around the property. The accusation floated in the cold air. Ellie stared at him, then at Nicholas, then back at Bradley. Something inside her settled. Fear disappeared. Not entirely, but enough. Because she suddenly understood something. Adults didn't always tell the truth. Even important adults, even rich adults, even respected adults. Bradley smiled politely, but his eyes kept flicking toward her backpack. toward the notebook hidden inside, as if he knew exactly what she carried, as if he feared it. And that fear told Ellie more than any confession ever could. A few nearby customers had stopped walking. A valet attendant watched from the curb. 2 servers stood inside the window looking out. Silent witnesses. Nicholas looked from Bradley to Ellie, then back again. The tension was impossible to miss. Finally, he asked a simple question. One that instantly changed everything. "What exactly is she trying to tell me, Bradley?" For the first time since the conversation began, Bradley Turner didn't have an immediate answer. For the first time since the conversation began, Bradley Turner didn't have an immediate answer. The silence lasted only a second, but everyone felt it. The valet standing beside the curb felt it. The couple waiting near the entrance felt it. Even the 2 servers watching from inside the restaurant felt it. Bradley recovered quickly. Years of experience had taught him how to survive uncomfortable moments. He laughed softly. A practiced laugh, harmless, dismissive. "The little girl is confused," Bradley said. Nicholas didn't look away. "Confused about what?" Bradley spread his hands. "About how business works." Ellie frowned. "I'm not confused." Bradley's smile tightened. Nicholas noticed, again. A small thing, but important. The man who normally controlled every conversation seemed uncomfortable around an 8-year-old child. That alone felt strange. Nicholas turned toward Ellie. "What exactly have you seen?" Bradley immediately interrupted. "Mr. Hughes, this really isn't—" Nicholas raised a hand. Bradley stopped talking. The gesture wasn't aggressive, but it was final. For the first time, Nicholas wanted to hear the child speak before the adults. Ellie took a breath. The cold air stung her lungs. She could feel dozens of eyes on her. Most children would have looked down. Most children would have stepped back. Ellie didn't. She reached into her backpack. Bradley's shoulders stiffened. Another tiny reaction, another detail. Ellie noticed everything. She removed her notebook. The same worn notebook, the same pages, the same careful handwriting. "I saw a truck." Nicholas nodded. "You mentioned that. It comes at night." "Okay. It takes food." Bradley sighed dramatically. "There are deliveries every day." Ellie shook her head. "This isn't delivering." The certainty in her voice surprised everyone, including Nicholas. She opened the notebook. There. She pointed at several pages. Dates, times, license plate numbers, descriptions, locations, everything organized, everything detailed. Nicholas stared. This wasn't random. This wasn't imagination. Someone had spent time recording facts. Real facts. Bradley stepped closer. His voice remained calm. "She's a child." Nicholas looked up. "Yes. Children misunderstand things." "Sometimes." Bradley nodded. "Exactly." But Nicholas wasn't looking at Bradley anymore. He was looking at the notebook. Every page raised more questions, not fewer. Ellie pointed to a date. "That's when I first saw it." Another date, and again. Another, and again. Nicholas slowly turned the pages. The same truck appeared repeatedly. The same alley, the same late-night schedule, the same observations, too consistent to ignore. The wind swept down the street. Snowflakes drifted between them. Nobody spoke. Finally, Nicholas closed the notebook. "When did you start writing these?" "A few weeks ago." "Why?" Ellie thought carefully, then answered honestly. "Because it felt wrong." A strange expression crossed Nicholas's face. The words triggered something deep inside him. A memory. Old. Forgotten. A little boy standing beside his mother in a grocery store, watching another customer secretly pay for their food. The boy had asked why. His mother had answered, Because some things feel right before they make sense. The memory vanished, but the feeling remained. Nicholas looked at Ellie. Maybe she wasn't trying to prove anything. Maybe she was simply following the feeling that something wasn't right. Bradley checked his watch. An unusual gesture, nervous, impatient, trying to move things along. Nicholas noticed that too. "We'll discuss this later," Bradley said. "No," Nicholas replied. The word came immediately. Bradley blinked. "No." "No." Nicholas handed the notebook back to Ellie. Then he faced Bradley. "I'd like an internal review." The color changed slightly in Bradley's face. Not enough for most people to notice. Enough for Nicholas. A review? Yes. Of what exactly? The donation program. Bradley laughed. The sound felt forced. "Because of a notebook." Nicholas remained calm. "Because questions deserve answers." Bradley looked around. People were still watching. The audience bothered him. Nicholas could see that. The public image he worked so hard to maintain suddenly felt fragile. Bradley adjusted his tie. Of course. His smile returned. "We have nothing to hide." The words sounded right. Yet, somehow, they felt wrong. That evening, Sarah Miller was cleaning the kitchen when her phone vibrated. A text message from Nicholas Hughes. She stared at the screen. In 15 years with the company, Nicholas had never texted her directly. Not once. The message was short. "Need to ask a few questions tomorrow. Confidential." Sarah read it twice. Then 3 times. A knot formed in her stomach. Because she already knew what the questions would be about. The food, the missing food, the reports, the truck. For months, she had noticed inconsistencies. Not enough to prove anything, enough to worry, enough to lose sleep, enough to wonder if speaking up would cost her job. The kitchen suddenly felt quieter. The smell of bread lingered in the air. Steam drifted from a sink full of hot water. Sarah leaned against a counter, thinking. For months she had told herself she might be wrong. For months she had convinced herself someone else would notice. Someone else would investigate. Someone else would take responsibility. Then a little girl had appeared and asked questions nobody else wanted to ask. Sarah stared out the window toward the dark alley. The same alley where trucks came and went. The same alley where she had watched food disappear. The same alley where she had remained silent. Not anymore. Across the city, Ellie sat beside her mother. Angela looked better tonight. Not healthy, but better. The medicine was helping. The apartment remained cold. The heater rattled constantly. Yet there was comfort in simply being together. Angela folded laundry while Ellie completed homework. Finally, Angela spoke. "You seem distracted." Ellie smiled. "You always know." "I usually do." Ellie hesitated. Then she told her mother about seeing Nicholas Hughes, about the notebook, about the conversation. Angela stopped folding. A worried look crossed her face. "Ellie." "What?" "Please tell me you're being careful." "I am." Angela sighed. Sometimes adults don't like being questioned. Ellie thought about Bradley, about the way his eyes followed the notebook, about how nervous he seemed. "I know." Angela sat beside her daughter. The couch springs creaked beneath them. For several moments neither spoke. Snow tapped softly against the window. Then Angela gently brushed a curl from Ellie's forehead. "You don't have to fix everything." Ellie stared down at her notebook. "I know." "Do you?" A long pause followed. Finally, Ellie answered. "No." Angela laughed softly. The first real laugh in days. Then she kissed the top of Ellie's head. "You got that from me." Several miles away, Bradley Turner sat alone inside his office. The building was nearly empty. Most employees had gone home. Outside the windows, darkness covered the city. Bradley stared at his phone, then made a call. The line connected immediately. "We have a problem," a voice answered. "How bad?" Bradley looked toward the closed office door. His jaw tightened. Worse than before. What happened? Bradley's eyes narrowed. He thought about the notebook, the questions, the review, Nicholas Hughes. Then he spoke 4 words that made even him uneasy. The kid wrote everything down. Silence answered from the other end. Long, heavy, dangerous. And for the first time since this began, Bradley Turner felt something he rarely experienced. Fear. Fear changes people. Some become louder. Some become quieter. Bradley Turner became careful. Very careful. The morning after his phone call, he arrived at Hughes' kitchen nearly an hour earlier than usual. The parking garage was almost empty. The air smelled of concrete and motor oil. His footsteps echoed through the underground level as he walked toward the elevator. He checked over his shoulder twice. Nobody. Still, his stomach remained tight. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside. As the numbers climbed, one thought repeated itself. The notebook, the kid, the review. He had dealt with complaints before, employees, vendors, customers. Those situations were manageable, predictable. But this was different, because Nicholas Hughes was asking questions, and Nicholas almost never asked questions unless something bothered him deeply. Bradley knew that better than anyone. Meanwhile, across town, Ellie sat at the kitchen table before school. The apartment smelled faintly of oatmeal, a small victory. Angela looked slightly stronger this morning. Not healthy, but stronger. Her fever had finally begun to break. The color was slowly returning to her face. Ellie felt relieved. She hadn't realized how worried she had been until now. Angela stirred her tea. Steam curled upward. "You look tired," Ellie shrugged. "A little." "Ooh, you were thinking about that truck again." It wasn't a question. Ellie smiled weakly. "You always know." Angela pointed a spoon at her. "Because you make the same face." "What face?" "The one you make when you're trying to solve a mystery." Ellie laughed. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then her eyes drifted toward the notebook. Angela noticed immediately. The smile faded. "Ellie, I'm being careful." "That's not what I asked." Ellie looked down. Angela sighed. "Sometimes the truth makes people uncomfortable." "I know." "No." Angela shook her head gently. "You understand the words. That's different." Silence settled between them. The heater rattled. A truck passed outside. Snow slid from a nearby roof. Finally, Angela reached across the table. "You have a good heart." Ellie looked up, but good hearts still need to be careful. Ellie nodded. Yet deep inside she knew she couldn't stop now. Not after everything she had seen. Not after Rebecca's reaction. Not after Bradley's fear, especially Bradley's fear. At Hughes' kitchen headquarters, Nicholas Hughes sat alone in a conference room. Dozens of documents covered the table. Delivery reports, inventory logs, donation records, financial summaries. Most executives delegated this kind of work. Nicholas normally did too. Not today. Today he wanted answers himself. The door opened. David Collins entered. Nicholas's driver carried 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use one." Nicholas accepted it. "Thanks." David sat across from him. Unlike most employees, David wasn't intimidated by wealth. Years earlier, he had served in the military. Later, he had worked security. Now, he drove for Nicholas. The job required observation. David was exceptionally good at observing. "You've been staring at those papers for 3 hours," David said. Nicholas smiled faintly. "That obvious?" "A little." Nicholas leaned back. "What do you think of Bradley?" David considered the question carefully, professionally, honestly. David looked through the glass wall towards the city, then back again. I think he likes control. Nicholas waited. David continued. I think he likes looking important. Anything else? Another pause. Longer this time. Then David nodded. Last week I saw him arguing with Sarah Miller. Nicholas looked up. The chef? Yes. What about... I couldn't hear everything. David frowned. But Sarah looked upset. Nicholas filed the information away. Another piece, a small piece. Still important. The puzzle was slowly growing. Across the city, Sarah Miller stood inside the kitchen freezer. Cold air surrounded her. Rows of shelves stretched around her. Vegetables, meat, prepared ingredients. Everything organized. Everything accounted for. Mostly. Sarah stared at an inventory sheet. The numbers didn't match. Again. Just as they hadn't matched last month, or the month before. Her pulse quickened. For months she had ignored it. Or tried to, now she couldn't. Nicholas's message from the night before kept replaying in her mind. Need to ask a few questions tomorrow. Confidential. Sarah closed her eyes. The smell of frozen food, the hum of refrigeration units, the cold against her skin. Suddenly, she felt exhausted. Not physically, morally, tired of pretending she didn't notice. Tired of explaining away inconsistencies. Tired of hoping someone else would step forward. A knock interrupted her thoughts. One of the kitchen assistants appeared. Sarah. Yeah, Mr. Hughes is here. Her stomach dropped. Earlier than expected, much earlier. It's time, she whispered. That afternoon, Rebecca Parker received a call. The caller ID displayed a number she recognized immediately. Hughes Foundation. Rebecca sat up straighter. Hello, a professional voice answered. Miss Parker, Mr. Hughes would like to meet with you. Rebecca's expression changed. Fast. Today, if possible. Rebecca glanced toward the food pantry. Several shelves sat half empty. Children would arrive after school soon. Families would follow. The shortage was becoming impossible to ignore. Yes, she said quietly. Today works. After the call ended, she stared through her office window. Maybe things were finally moving. Or maybe someone was trying to contain the damage. Either way, the next conversation mattered. A lot. Late that evening, snow began falling again. Thicker this time. The city glowed beneath white flakes. Streetlights reflected off icy sidewalks. Ellie pulled her coat tighter and followed Rebecca across a quiet street. Rebecca had reluctantly agreed to let Ellie accompany her, only because the little girl refused to stay behind, only because Ellie already knew too much. They stood near a row of abandoned warehouses. The area smelled of wet concrete and diesel fuel. Far from restaurants, far from reporters, far from wealthy neighborhoods. Rebecca pointed toward a building across the road. That's the address. Ellie looked carefully. No signs, no logos, just a gray warehouse. Ordinary. Forgettable. The perfect place to hide something. A truck appeared in the distance. Ellie's heart immediately recognized it. The same one. Rebecca followed her gaze. The truck turned into the lot. Then another arrived. Then another. Large metal doors rolled open. A harsh mechanical sound cut through the night. The warehouse lights flickered on. Rebecca slowly lowered her binoculars. The color drained from her face. Oh no. Ellie looked up. What? Rebecca didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed over the binoculars. Ellie raised them. Focused. And froze. Rows. Hundreds of rows. Stacked floor to ceiling, boxes, food boxes, everywhere. Many carried Hughes Kitchen labels, some carried donation stickers. Others displayed community outreach markings, enough food to fill multiple centers, enough food to feed countless families, enough food that should never have been sitting inside a secret warehouse. The cold suddenly felt sharper, the wind louder, the truth heavier. Rebecca immediately reached for her phone. "We need pictures." Ellie lowered the binoculars. "What happens now?" Rebecca looked toward the warehouse, toward the evidence, toward the truck drivers moving boxes under bright lights. Then she answered. "Now we prove it." Neither of them noticed another vehicle parked farther down the street. Dark windows, engine running, watching. Inside sat a man holding a phone, and as he looked toward Ellie and Rebecca, he quietly spoke into it. "They found the warehouse." A pause. Then a reply came through the speaker. The voice belonged to Bradley Turner, and it sounded colder than the winter night outside. "They found the warehouse." The words hung in the air. Inside the dark SUV, the man lowered his phone. Snow struck the windshield in soft bursts. For several seconds, no reply came from the other end. Then Bradley Turner's voice finally returned. "Don't let them get inside." The line went dead. The man swallowed hard. Outside, Rebecca Parker was already taking photographs. One after another, the flash remained off. The images appeared grainy, but clear enough. Truck numbers, warehouse doors, food boxes, dates, evidence, real evidence. Ellie stood beside her. The freezing wind pushed against her coat. Her cheeks burned from the cold, yet she barely noticed. Her attention remained fixed on the warehouse. Workers moved quickly now, too quickly. Boxes disappeared deeper into the building. People shouted instructions. Forklifts beeped. Metal doors slammed. The entire place suddenly felt alive, like an anthill after someone kicked it. Rebecca lowered her phone. "They know." Ellie looked up. "How?" "I don't know." But deep down, Rebecca suspected exactly how. Someone had warned them. Someone connected to Bradley, someone who knew they were here. The realization made her stomach tighten. "We should go," Ellie frowned. "But we just got here." Rebecca placed a hand on her shoulder. "We already have what we came for." The little girl looked disappointed. Then something caught her eye. Near the loading dock, a worker dropped a document. The paper slid across the snow. Nobody noticed. Everyone seemed too busy, too rushed. Ellie pointed. "Look." Rebecca followed her gaze. The paper continued tumbling across the pavement. Closer, closer, until it stopped against a chain-link fence. Neither spoke. Then Rebecca moved, quickly, carefully. She crossed the road, retrieved the document, and immediately froze. Her eyes widened. "What is it?" Ellie asked. Rebecca stared at the page. A delivery manifest. Names, addresses, shipment records, dates. And beside several entries appeared a company name Rebecca recognized instantly. The same transportation company that had previously been investigated for selling donated goods. The same company connected to the truck, the same company Ellie had written in her notebook. Rebecca folded the paper carefully. "This is important." Ellie nodded. Even she could see that. The warehouse wasn't just suspicious anymore, it was connected. Connected to everything. The following morning, Nicholas Hughes sat across from Sarah Miller. The meeting took place in a private conference room. No assistants, no executives, no interruptions, just questions. Sarah held a cup of coffee. Her hands trembled slightly. Nicholas noticed. "You're nervous." Sarah laughed softly. "Should I not be? Not if you've done nothing wrong." Sarah stared into her coffee. Steam drifted upward. The smell reminded her of early mornings in the kitchen. Simpler mornings, before all this. Finally, Nicholas spoke. "I need honesty." Sarah nodded. Okay. Have you noticed anything unusual with food inventory? The question arrived gently, yet Sarah felt its weight immediately. For a moment she considered saying nothing. The safe choice, the comfortable choice, the choice she had made for months. Then she thought about Ellie, a child, 8 years old, standing outside in the snow, asking questions adults were afraid to ask. Sarah took a breath. Yes. Nicholas remained silent, letting her continue. Some food disappears. How much? I don't know exactly. Why didn't you report it? The answer hurt, because she already knew it sounded weak. I was afraid. The room became very quiet. Nicholas didn't judge her, didn't criticize her, he simply listened. Sarah continued, I thought maybe there was an explanation. And now, Sarah looked directly at him. There isn't. Nicholas leaned back slowly. The answer confirmed what he already suspected. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And the problem wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. At the same time, Bradley Turner sat inside his office. The blinds were closed, the door locked. His tie hung loose around his neck. 3 empty coffee cups cluttered the desk. His phone rang. Again. Another problem, another complication. He answered immediately. What? The voice on the other end sounded anxious. The warehouse workers are talking. Bradley's eyes closed. Of course they were. Fear always spread, especially when people sensed trouble coming. Tell them to keep quiet. They want assurances. Bradley laughed bitterly. Assurances. The word almost sounded funny. Everyone wanted assurances when things started falling apart. The workers, the drivers, the contractors. Nobody wanted responsibility. Everyone wanted protection. Bradley rubbed his forehead. For the first time in years, control felt like it was slipping away, and he hated that feeling. Later that afternoon, Rebecca Parker arrived at Hughes headquarters. The building towered above the street. Glass, steel, money, power. Everything seemed polished. Everything seemed expensive. She carried a folder beneath her arm. Inside rested the warehouse photographs, the manifest, additional records, and copies of recent food shortages from the community center. Evidence Nicholas personally met her in the lobby. That surprised her. Most billionaires didn't greet visitors themselves, especially not community center directors. Yet Nicholas extended his hand. Rebecca. Mr. Hughes. Please, Nicholas. They entered a private office. The city stretched beyond massive windows. For a moment, Rebecca wondered how many people looked down from towers like this without ever seeing the neighborhoods below. Then she remembered why she was here. She opened the folder, placed the photographs on the desk. Nicholas studied them carefully. One image, then another, then another. His expression darkened. The warehouse, the trucks, the labels. The evidence spoke for itself. Finally, Rebecca handed over the delivery manifest. Nicholas read it silently. Every page seemed to add another layer, another problem, another lie. When he finished, he placed the papers down. What do you need from me? Rebecca blinked. The question surprised her. She had expected excuses, defensiveness, corporate language. Instead, she heard something simpler. Responsibility. Rebecca answered honestly. The truth. Nicholas nodded slowly. So do I. That evening, Ellie returned home from school. The apartment smelled different. Better. Chicken soup simmered on the stove. Angela stood in the kitchen. Actually standing, not resting, not coughing, standing. Ellie's face lit up. Mom! Angela laughed. The sound filled the apartment, a real laugh, strong, healthy, for the first time in weeks. I told you I'd get better. Ellie hugged her tightly. The warmth felt wonderful. For a little while, the warehouse disappeared. The trucks disappeared. Bradley disappeared. Everything disappeared. There was only family. Only home. Only relief. Then, someone knocked on the apartment door. Both froze. The sound seemed oddly loud. Angela frowned. "We aren't expecting anyone." Another knock. Slow. Deliberate. Ellie looked toward the entrance. A strange feeling settled into her stomach. Not fear, not exactly. Something else. Instinct. The same instinct that had made her write down the truck numbers. The same instinct that had told her something was wrong. Angela moved toward the door. Ellie followed. Carefully, quietly. Angela looked through the peephole. Then her expression changed. Immediately. "Who is it?" Ellie asked. Angela didn't answer. Not right away. She simply stepped back from the door and whispered 4 words that made Ellie's heart start racing. "Why is he here? Why is he here?" Angela's whisper barely reached Ellie's ears. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. Quieter. The pot of soup still simmered on the stove. Steam drifted towards the ceiling. The comforting smell that had filled the room moments earlier seemed to disappear. Another knock echoed through the apartment. Slow, patient. Whoever stood outside wasn't leaving. Angela looked through the peephole again. Her shoulders tensed. Ellie's stomach tightened. "Mom." Angela stepped away from the door. "It's Bradley Turner." The name hit Ellie immediately, like cold water. "What?" Angela nodded. "The man from the restaurant." Ellie felt her pulse quicken. How did he know where they lived? Why was he here? Neither question had a good answer. The third knock came, still calm, still deliberate. Not the knock of a friend. Not the knock of a neighbor. The knock of someone who expected the door to open. Angela squared her shoulders, then unlocked it. Bradley Turner stood in the hallway wearing an expensive coat dusted with snow. A polite smile rested on his face. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Johnson." Angela remained in the doorway. "Can I help you?" Bradley's gaze shifted briefly toward Ellie, then back again. "I hope I'm not interrupting dinner." The smell of soup drifted into the hallway. Bradley seemed to notice. Angela didn't invite him inside, neither did Ellie. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody moved. Finally, Bradley spoke again. "I wanted to clear up a misunderstanding." Angela folded her arms. "What misunderstanding?" "The one involving your daughter." Ellie immediately stepped closer to her mother. Bradley's smile remained fixed. "I understand she's been making accusations." The word accusation sounded ugly, deliberate, calculated. Angela glanced at Ellie, then back at Bradley. "My daughter told me what she saw." Bradley's expression didn't change. "Children are often mistaken." The sentence hung in the air. Ellie felt something shift inside her. Not fear, frustration. Adults kept saying the same thing, too young, too small, too mistaken. As if truth changed depending on who said it. Bradley continued. "We wouldn't want a child's imagination creating problems." Angela's eyes narrowed. "My daughter doesn't have a habit of lying." Bradley smiled. "I'm sure she doesn't." The answer sounded polite, but something underneath it felt insulting. Ellie noticed. Angela noticed too. Bradley reached into his coat pocket. He removed a business card, then placed it on a nearby table. "If she remembers anything differently, please contact me." Differently. Not accurately. Differently. Another carefully chosen word. Then Bradley looked directly at Ellie. For a brief second, the smile disappeared. The real expression underneath surfaced. Cold. Warning. Controlled. "Good night." Without another word, he turned and walked away. The hallway swallowed his footsteps. Silence returned. Angela immediately locked the door, then locked the second lock, then the third. Ellie stared at the business card. Neither touched it. Finally, Angela spoke. He shouldn't know where we live. No, he definitely shouldn't. Ellie nodded slowly. Something about the visit felt wrong. Very wrong. Not because Bradley threatened them. He hadn't. Not directly. That was what made it worse. Everything had been polite, careful, professional, and somehow far more frightening. The next morning, Nicholas Hughes stood before a room full of executives. The quarterly leadership meeting had already started. Charts filled large screens. Revenue projections, expansion plans, marketing goals. Nobody noticed Nicholas wasn't paying attention. His thoughts remained elsewhere: warehouse photographs, food shortages, delivery records, Rebecca Parker's evidence, Sarah Miller's testimony. The pieces were beginning to fit together, and the picture wasn't pretty. Across the room, Bradley Turner delivered a presentation. Confident, smooth, polished, the same performance Nicholas had admired for years. But now something looked different. Not Bradley. Nicholas. Because once doubt entered a person's mind, details became impossible to ignore. Every answer felt rehearsed. Every smile felt calculated. Every explanation felt too clean. Bradley finished his presentation. Polite applause followed. Then Nicholas stood. The room fell quiet immediately. What percentage of donated food reaches community partners? Bradley answered instantly. 98%, Nicholas nodded. And the remaining 2%? Operational loss. What kind? The first crack appeared. Tiny, but visible. Bradley's answer arrived a second too late. Transportation. Nicholas looked around the room. Then back again. Interesting. Several executives exchanged glances. Nobody understood where this was going, except Bradley. Bradley understood perfectly. Meanwhile, Rebecca Parker arrived at a meeting organized by Hughes Foundation. Several community leaders filled the room. School administrators, shelter directors, church representatives, food bank managers, people who actually worked with struggling families every day. Rebecca brought her folder. The same folder, the evidence, the photographs, the records. Before the meeting began, conversations flowed naturally. Coffee cups clinked. People exchanged greetings. Then Rebecca overheard something. Two directors speaking quietly nearby. "Have your deliveries been smaller lately?" The other nodded. "For months." Rebecca froze. Another voice joined. "Ours too," then another. "And ours." Suddenly, a pattern emerged. Not one center, not two, many. The shortages weren't isolated. They were widespread, systematic. Rebecca's heart raced, because this meant the problem was much bigger than anyone realized. Much bigger. Later that afternoon, Ellie sat inside the community center. Snow tapped against the windows. Children played basketball in the gym. The sound echoed through the building. Rebecca sat across from her. The folder lay open between them. Photographs, records, delivery manifests, evidence. A growing mountain of evidence. Yet Ellie looked worried. Rebecca noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" Ellie hesitated, then answered honestly. "Nobody believes kids." Rebecca blinked. "Some people do. Not most." The little girl stared at one of the photographs, then quietly added, "Adults always ask who said something before they ask if it's true." The sentence landed heavily. Rebecca sat back. For a moment, she didn't know what to say, because the child was right. Far too often, people judged information by the source rather than the facts. Children, poor families, the elderly, the overlooked. Their voices carried less weight. Even when they were right. Rebecca smiled sadly. "That's why evidence matters." Ellie nodded. She understood, maybe more than most adults. That evening, everything began unraveling. Nicholas received a call from David Collins. His voice sounded unusually urgent. "Where are you?" "My office." "Stay there." Nicholas frowned. "What happened?" David paused, then answered, "I found something." The seriousness in his voice immediately captured Nicholas's attention. "What kind of something?" "A file." "What file?" David lowered his voice. "The security footage Bradley said was deleted." Nicholas sat upright. The room suddenly felt very still. Outside his office window, Chicago glowed beneath falling snow. Inside, his pulse quickened. Because if the footage still existed, if it showed what he suspected, everything could change. Everything. David spoke again. "You're going to want to see this immediately." "You're going to want to see this immediately." Nicholas Hughes was already reaching for his coat. 10 minutes later, he stepped into a private security office inside Hughes' headquarters. The room was small. No luxury, no glass walls, no city view, just monitors, hard drives, security equipment. David Collins stood beside a computer screen. His expression was serious, more serious than Nicholas had ever seen. "What did you find?" Nicholas asked. David inserted a flash drive. The footage Bradley said no longer existed. Nicholas stared at the monitor. "You recovered it," David nodded. "One of the backup servers wasn't erased." The screen flickered. Video appeared. A timestamp glowed in the corner. The loading dock behind Hughes' kitchen. Late at night, snow falling. Forklifts moving. Workers carrying boxes. Nicholas folded his arms. At first, everything looked normal. Then the truck arrived. The same truck, the same unmarked truck. David paused the footage. "Watch closely." The video resumed. Several workers loaded dozens of sealed Hughes kitchen donation boxes. Not trash, not expired food, donation inventory, fresh inventory. Nicholas's jaw tightened. The footage continued. Then a familiar figure stepped into frame. Bradley Turner. Clear as day, no doubt, no confusion, no explanation. Bradley personally supervised the loading process. He checked paperwork, spoke with drivers, signed documents, then handed an envelope to one of the men. David froze the frame. Nicholas leaned forward. Cash. A thick envelope. Money. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The hum of computer equipment filled the room. Finally, Nicholas exhaled slowly. How many times? David opened another folder. Hundreds of recordings? Nicholas closed his eyes briefly. The scale suddenly became clear. This wasn't one mistake, not one bad decision, not one isolated incident. It was a system, a business, a theft operation hidden inside a charity program, and Ellie Johnson had noticed it before anyone else. An 8-year-old girl. The realization hit hard, very hard. Meanwhile, Bradley Turner sat inside his office. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Every call brought more bad news. Warehouse workers were talking. Drivers were worried. Records were surfacing. People were becoming nervous. And nervous people became dangerous. Bradley stared at his reflection in the dark office window. For years, everything had worked perfectly. Nobody asked questions. Nobody checked details. Nobody cared enough to look. Then one child had written down a license plate. One child. The thought made him furious. His phone vibrated again. A message appeared. Meeting requested immediately. Nicholas Hughes. Bradley's stomach dropped. He already knew something had happened, something significant. The timing alone told him. He looked around his office, the awards, the framed certificates, the photographs with executives. Years spent building a reputation. Years spent climbing. Years spent convincing people he belonged among powerful men, and now everything felt fragile, like glass about to crack. At the community center, Rebecca Parker was reviewing records when her phone rang. Nicholas. She answered immediately. Rebecca. His voice sounded different, calmer, stronger, like a man who had finally stopped searching and started acting. We found the footage. Rebecca sat upright. And a pause followed. Then Nicholas answered. It shows everything. Rebecca closed her eyes. Relief washed through her. Not joy, relief, because evidence mattered, truth mattered. But proof changed everything. What happens now? She asked. Nicholas looked through the office window towards the Chicago skyline. Then he answered quietly. Now, nobody gets to pretend. That evening, a private meeting took place inside Hughes headquarters. Several executives attended. Corporate attorneys, compliance officers, financial investigators. The atmosphere felt tense. Nobody smiled. Nobody joked. Stacks of documents covered the conference table. Photographs, video stills, warehouse manifests, delivery records, donation reports. Every piece of evidence reinforced the next. The puzzle was complete. Bradley Turner arrived 10 minutes late. His confidence was gone. Not entirely, but enough. Nicholas noticed immediately. Sit down. Bradley obeyed. No argument, no smile, just silence. Nicholas pressed a button. The security footage appeared on a large screen. The room became very still. Bradley watched. The loading dock, the truck, the boxes, himself. Every second felt heavier than the last. Nobody spoke. The video didn't need help. It told the story itself. When the footage ended, Nicholas turned toward Bradley. Do you want to explain this? Bradley swallowed. Then tried. At first, he blamed logistics, then accounting errors, then contractors, then communication failures. Each explanation sounded weaker than the one before. Finally, an attorney interrupted. The signatures were forged. Silence. Another investigator spoke. The warehouse records don't match company records. More silence. A third person added, the cash payments are documented. The room felt colder. Bradley's explanations collapsed one after another, like dominoes. Then something happened. Something unexpected. Bradley lost his temper. Years of control vanished. Years of careful image disappeared. His face reddened. His voice rose. You think I did this alone? The room froze. Nicholas stared. Nobody moved. Bradley immediately realized his mistake. Too late, far too late, the words were already out. The truth had slipped through. Just enough. The irony was brutal. For months, Bradley had hidden evidence, deleted records, manipulated reports, controlled narratives, and now, under pressure, he had exposed himself. His own anger had done what investigators couldn't. The room remained silent. Nicholas finally spoke. Thank you. Bradley looked confused. Nicholas continued. That statement is being recorded. The color drained from Bradley's face. Completely. Across town, Ellie sat beside Angela on the couch. The television played quietly. Neither paid attention. Snow continued falling outside. The apartment felt warm tonight. Warmer than usual. Angela looked healthier every day. A blessing Ellie didn't take for granted. Then her phone buzzed. Rebecca Parker. Ellie answered immediately. Hello. Rebecca smiled when she heard the familiar voice. Ellie. Hi. Rebecca glanced out her office window. You were right. Ellie blinked. What? You were right. The words felt strange. Adults rarely said them. Not to children, not like this. For a moment, Ellie didn't know what to say. Rebecca continued. The evidence proved everything. A long silence followed. Then Ellie asked the question that mattered most. "What happens to the food?" Rebecca smiled. Even though Ellie couldn't see it, "That's exactly why I called." The little girl had spent weeks uncovering the truth, yet the first thing she cared about wasn't punishment. Not revenge, not recognition, the food, the families, the people. Rebecca felt her eyes sting slightly. "The food is going where it was supposed to go," Ellie smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached her eyes. The kind that made all the cold nights feel worth it. Then Rebecca added one more thing. "Nicholas Hughes wants to meet you tomorrow." Ellie sat upright. "What for?" Rebecca looked at the city lights outside, then answered honestly, "Because he finally understands who helped save his company." Ellie's smile faded into surprise. But before she could respond, another thought crossed Rebecca's mind. A thought she kept to herself. Tomorrow wasn't just going to change Nicholas Hughes. It was going to change Ellie's life, too. The next morning, Chicago woke beneath a blanket of fresh snow. Sunlight reflected off rooftops. The city looked clean, quiet, peaceful. But inside Hughes' headquarters, one of the biggest storms in company history was unfolding. Nicholas Hughes stood before a room packed with executives, attorneys, compliance officers, and board members. No reporters, no cameras. Not yet. The truth needed to be handled correctly. Not dramatically. Properly. The large screen behind him displayed photographs, warehouse records, delivery logs, security footage, evidence. Every document told the same story. For months, donated food had been diverted. For months, community centers had received less than promised. For months, someone had profited while families struggled. Nicholas looked around the room. No one spoke. No one defended Bradley anymore. There was nothing left to defend. An attorney closed a folder. "The evidence is overwhelming." A board member nodded. "What happens next?" Nicholas answered immediately. "Full cooperation. No hesitation. No negotiation. No cover-ups." Several people exchanged glances. Nicholas continued. "Everything goes to investigators." The room remained silent. Then one board member asked the question everyone had been thinking. How did we miss this? Nicholas stared at the evidence, then gave an answer nobody expected. We stopped listening. The room became even quieter. "We listened to reports." He pointed toward the documents. "We listened to titles." He looked toward the executives. "We listened to people with authority." Then he paused. "But we ignored people closest to the problem." No one argued, because no one could. Several hours later, Nicholas sat inside his office. For the first time in days, he wasn't reading reports. Instead, he was waiting. A soft knock sounded. His assistant stepped inside. "They're here." Nicholas stood. A strange feeling settled over him. Nervousness, not something he experienced often. "Send them in." The door opened. Angela Johnson entered first. Ellie followed close behind. The little girl wore her best coat, the same coat, still worn, still slightly too large, but carefully cleaned. Angela's posture remained cautious, protective. Nicholas understood why. Trust wasn't automatic, not after everything. Not after Bradley had shown up at their apartment. Not after the weeks they had endured. "Thank you for coming." Angela nodded politely. Ellie looked around the office. The massive windows, the city skyline, the bookshelves, the polished furniture. Everything seemed very far away from Southside Chicago. Nicholas noticed her looking. "Pretty different from your apartment, huh?" Ellie nodded honestly. "A little." The answer made him smile. Only a little, not a lot, just a little. Exactly the kind of answer he expected from her. Nicholas motioned toward a seating area. Everyone sat. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Nicholas looked directly at Ellie. "I owe you an apology." The little girl blinked. "You do?" "Yes." "Why?" Nicholas leaned forward. "Because you tried to tell me the truth." Ellie listened quietly. "And I didn't listen fast enough." The room fell silent. Angela looked surprised. Most powerful people apologized carefully. Indirectly, Nicholas wasn't doing that. He continued. "You saw something important." He glanced toward Angela. "And neither of you should have gone through what happened." Angela studied him, searching for insincerity, searching for excuses. She found neither, only regret. Real regret. Nicholas reached into a folder beside him. Several documents rested inside, carefully prepared, reviewed, approved. Nothing impulsive, nothing unrealistic. He slid them across the table. Angela frowned. "What is this?" Nicholas answered. "A scholarship program." Ellie looked confused. Nicholas smiled. "Not money today." He wanted that clear immediately. No gifts. No publicity stunt. No cameras. Angela relaxed slightly. Nicholas continued. "Our foundation is creating a long-term education scholarship." He looked at Ellie. "For students who demonstrate integrity, courage, and community leadership." Ellie blinked. The words sounded very adult. Nicholas laughed softly. "It means people who do the right thing when it's hard." Now she understood. "Oh." Angela slowly opened the folder. The scholarship would cover educational support through high school. Tutoring, books, technology assistance, college preparation later, structured, transparent, realistic. The kind of help designed to create opportunity, not dependence. Angela looked up. "This is because of Ellie." Nicholas nodded. "Partly." Then he surprised them both. "It's also because we should have been doing this already." Later that afternoon, Nicholas accompanied Angela and Ellie to the Southside Community Center. The building buzzed with activity. Children played basketball. Volunteers organized supplies. Families arrived for food assistance. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. For the first time in months, shelves looked full. Very full. Truck after truck had delivered food all week, properly, documented, verified. Exactly as the program originally intended. Rebecca Parker stood near the entrance. A smile spread across her face when she saw Ellie. "There she is." Ellie hugged her immediately. Rebecca laughed. "You started something pretty big." Ellie looked embarrassed. "I just wrote things down." Rebecca smiled. "Sometimes that's enough." Nearby, Sarah Miller supervised volunteers unloading food. She looked happier than anyone had seen in years. No fear, no anxiety, no looking over her shoulder. Just work, good work, meaningful work. When she spotted Ellie, she waved. The little girl waved back enthusiastically. Then Sarah walked over. "You know something." "What?" Sarah crouched beside her. "I think you saved more meals than you realize." Ellie looked toward the pantry shelves. Rows and rows of food, families collecting groceries, children carrying bags. The sight made her smile, a small smile, but genuine. That evening, a public statement was released. Bradley Turner had been formally terminated. The company confirmed an ongoing investigation. Multiple contractors faced scrutiny. Additional audits began immediately. The process would take time. Justice often did. But it had started. And this time it was backed by evidence, not rumors, not assumptions. Evidence, the strongest kind of truth. As sunset painted Chicago in shades of gold and orange, Nicholas stood outside the community center. The cold air carried the smell of bread and soup. Children laughed nearby. Volunteers loaded supplies. Life moved forward. David Collins joined him. Neither spoke for a while. Then David finally asked, "You okay?" Nicholas looked through the window. Inside, Ellie sat at a table helping younger children organize donated books. No cameras, no reporters, no attention. Just helping. Nicholas smiled. "Yeah?" David followed his gaze. "Funny." "What?" David chuckled. An entire corporation missed what one little girl saw. Nicholas nodded slowly. Then he answered with words he knew he would remember for the rest of his life. She wasn't seeing more than everyone else. David looked at him. Nicholas glanced back toward Ellie. "We were just looking away." Across the room, Ellie laughed at something one of the younger children said. The sound carried faintly through the glass, warm, honest, hopeful, and for the first time in a very long time, Nicholas Hughes felt certain the future could be better than the past. But he still had one more thing to do. Tomorrow, the community program would officially reopen, and he wanted Ellie to stand beside him when it happened. Not because she was famous, not because she was a hero, but because she had reminded everyone of a simple truth. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one worth hearing most. The next morning arrived bright and cold. Sunlight reflected off fresh snow. Chicago looked peaceful. The kind of peaceful that only comes after a storm has finally passed. Inside the Southside Community Center, volunteers moved between tables carrying trays of fresh bread and hot soup. The smell filled the building. Warm, comforting, hopeful. Children laughed near the gym. Parents talked quietly over coffee. For the first time in months, nobody worried about whether food would arrive next week. The shelves were stocked. The refrigerators were full. The delivery schedules were transparent. Everything was being tracked, verified, accounted for. The way it should have been from the beginning. Near the entrance, Rebecca Parker adjusted a stack of pamphlets. Sarah Miller organized volunteers near the kitchen. David Collins helped unload the final delivery truck. Nobody had asked him to. He simply wanted to help. Today felt important, very important. Not because reporters would be arriving soon, not because company executives would attend, because today represented something rare. A mistake being corrected, a system being repaired, a promise finally being kept, and at the center of it all sat Ellie Johnson. She occupied a folding chair near the front row. Her hands rested in her lap. Her best coat hung neatly over the back of the chair. Angela sat beside her. The two looked nothing alike in size. Yet, at that moment, they shared the exact same nervous expression. Angela laughed softly. "You look scared," Ellie smiled. "I am." "Good." "What?" Angela squeezed her hand. "That means you care." Ellie looked toward the small stage. Several microphones stood waiting. Rows of chairs filled the room. People continued arriving. Community leaders, volunteers, families, teachers, workers, the kind of people who rarely appeared on magazine covers, yet somehow seemed to keep entire neighborhoods running. A few minutes later, Nicholas Hughes entered. The room immediately noticed. Some people applauded. Others simply watched. Nicholas acknowledged them politely, but he didn't walk toward the stage. Instead, he walked directly toward Angela and Ellie. The gesture surprised everyone, especially Ellie. Nicholas stopped beside her chair. "You ready?" Ellie shook her head immediately. The honesty made him laugh. "Good answer." Angela smiled. "I told her the same thing." Nicholas lowered his voice. "You don't have to say much." Ellie looked up. "What if I forget?" "Then forget." "What if I get nervous?" "Then be nervous." Ellie frowned. "That's not very helpful." Nicholas laughed again, a real laugh, one that hadn't appeared often lately. "No," he admitted, but it's honest. The little girl considered that, then nodded. Fair enough. The program began shortly afterward. The room quieted. Rebecca stepped onto the stage first. She spoke about the community, the families, the volunteers, the importance of accountability. Then Sarah spoke. She talked about food, not as inventory, not as numbers, but as people, meals, families, dignity. The audience listened carefully. Many nodded, because they understood. Finally, Nicholas stepped forward. The room became completely silent. For several moments he simply stood there, looking at everyone, looking at the community he had claimed to serve for years. Then he spoke. I owe many people an apology. No corporate language, no prepared excuses, no public relations strategy, just honesty. The audience immediately noticed. Nicholas continued. My company promised help. His voice remained steady. But for too long we assumed promises were enough. He looked toward Rebecca, toward Sarah, toward volunteers, toward families, then finally toward Ellie. We stopped listening. The room remained quiet. The words felt personal, because they were. Nicholas took a breath. A little girl reminded us that integrity matters more than image. Every head turned toward Ellie. Instantly, the attention made her sink slightly into her chair. Nicholas smiled. Then he stepped aside and pointed toward the stage. Ellie's eyes widened. Now Nicholas nodded. Now! Angela squeezed her hand once. You can do it. Ellie stood slowly. Her legs felt strangely heavy. The room seemed larger than before. The stage seemed farther away. Yet she walked anyway. One step, then another, until she reached the microphone. Silence filled the room. Hundreds of eyes watched. Ellie swallowed, then looked down briefly, then back up and spoke. My mom says people get stronger when someone helps them stand. The room listened. No movement, no interruptions. Just listening. Ellie continued. When I was hungry, I wanted food. A few soft smiles appeared. That's all. Some gentle laughter followed. The kind laughter that comes from understanding, not mockery. Ellie glanced toward Angela, then continued. But I learned something. The room waited. A warm meal doesn't solve every problem. She paused. But it helps someone keep walking. Silence. Deep silence, the kind that appears when words land exactly where they should. Several people lowered their eyes. Others nodded slowly. Rebecca felt tears forming. Sarah wiped at one eye. Even David looked away briefly. Ellie didn't realize the impact. She simply spoke the truth. The same thing she had done from the beginning. Nothing more. Nothing less. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause began slowly, then grew and grew and grew. Not because she delivered a perfect speech, not because she was dramatic, because she was genuine, because everyone recognized it. Weeks passed. Winter slowly loosened its grip on the city. Changes followed, real changes. Not headlines, not promises. Changes. Bradley Turner faced legal consequences through the proper process. Investigators continued reviewing records. Additional individuals became subjects of inquiry. The truth moved forward one document at a time, one fact at a time, one piece of evidence at a time. Inside Hughes Foundation oversight procedures were rebuilt. Independent audits became mandatory. Community representatives gained direct access to reporting systems. Transparency replaced assumptions. Meanwhile, Angela accepted a position helping coordinate food distribution programs. Not because someone handed her a favor, because she qualified, because she worked hard, because opportunities finally existed. Sarah became director of community food partnerships. Rebecca remained exactly who she had always been, a person who refused to stop caring, and Ellie remained Ellie. She still carried her notebook, still wrote things down, still asked uncomfortable questions, still noticed details. One evening, months later, she sat at the kitchen table doing homework. A bowl of hot soup rested nearby. Steam drifted upward. Angela prepared dinner in the kitchen. The apartment still wasn't luxurious, still wasn't large, still wasn't perfect, but it felt different, safer, warmer, more hopeful. Angela placed fresh bread on the table. Ellie smiled. Outside the window, snowflakes drifted softly through the night. Not many, just a few, enough to remind her of another night, a colder night, a harder night. The night she had stood outside a restaurant asking for one warm meal. Back then, a door had closed in her face. Now, another door had opened. Not because she was rescued, not because of luck, because she stayed honest when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Because she wrote things down. Because she refused to stop believing what she knew was true. And as mother and daughter shared dinner together, the apartment filled with warmth. The kind that comes from food, the kind that comes from family, and the kind that comes from knowing that truth eventually finds its way into the light. Sometimes the people society notices the least are the ones who see the truth most clearly. Ellie wasn't powerful. She wasn't wealthy. She didn't have influence, connections, or authority. What she had was honesty. She paid attention when others looked away. She trusted what she saw even when adults doubted her. This story reminds us that integrity is not measured by age, status, or income. A person's voice does not become valuable because they are rich, famous, or important. It becomes valuable when it is truthful. The story also teaches that kindness should never depend on someone's social position. A warm meal, a listening ear, or a moment of respect can change someone's day, and sometimes even their future. But real change happens when kindness is paired with responsibility. Helping people once is good. Building systems that continue helping people is even better. Most importantly, never assume that being small means being powerless. One honest observation, one brave decision, or one simple act of speaking up can create a ripple far bigger than we imagine. If this story touched your heart, share in the comments what lesson stayed with you the most. Have you ever seen someone do the right thing when nobody else would? We'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoy meaningful stories about courage, kindness, and justice, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next journey. This is a work of fiction created for storytelling and entertainment purposes.